The characters in Cyberpunk 2077 have an odd way of speaking, and no, I'm not referring to the various colloquialisms found within the lingo of Night City.
Gunk and
BD.
scratch. Corpse. Organic.
Preem.
Output.
Delta shard.
Flatline. Zero. Chum.
Netrunner.
Instead, I'm talking about a pattern of speech, a certain element that is frequently missing from this game's dialogue.
Won't leave you hanging, Jack. Familiar with the type.
Got a good memory for faces.
It is remarkably rare for any character, especially the player character V, to start a sentence with the word I. Even lines addressed directly to another party often omit the you at the beginning.
Should see a ladder.
Gonna decommiss before we learn how to rip the chip out.
Could have told me earlier.
Personal pronouns aren't gone completely, of course, but are instead used far more as the object of a sentence rather than as its subject. What's up with that? Having the characters speak this way is clearly a conscious choice, so what is the message conveyed through this change? The most obvious explanation is that it's a time saver. As technology gets better, it gets faster, and our appetite for speed and efficiency grows along with it. It's not as if we, the citizens of the 2020s, do not do this from time to time. Know what I mean? The inhabitants of Night City just do it more habitually, but I don't think speed is the full story. I would argue that this decrease in the use of I and you hints at something deeper, a core theme of the game that can be observed at nearly every notable or impactful moment throughout the story of 2077. We are losing our humanity. Subtle though it may be, this shift in speech places the person, the human, as the subject, the action taker of the sentences less often, and leaves said person as the object, that which is acted upon. This is largely how people in Cyberpunk treat themselves. They get implants which enhance their eyesight, grant them unnatural strength, and modify themselves to their synthetic heart's desires. The body is no longer sacrosanct. It is merely a thing, to be molded and shaped according to our whims. Why bother treating it with gentle, patient care when you can have a Ripper Doc fix any ailments from broken arms to weak lungs with a quick and dirty surgery that will have you home before you can say Nova? And I love how well the term Ripper Doc conveys the brutally efficient method employed by such practitioners. One of the very first things you do in this game is visit one such Ripper who upgrades your optics so that you can scan random people on the street and see if they are wanted for any crimes. So, that's cool. And in case you haven't yet realized that such practices are a little messed up, Cyberpunk slaps you across the face with the reality of the situation early in the campaign by having you pay a visit to the Maelstrom gang.
I hate these Borg fuckers.
As disturbing and despicable as the chromed out faces, or, former faces of the Maelstromites are, it's not hard to see how they got there. Given access to technology, humans will use it. Not because they should, but because they can. These guys aren't abnormal, they're just ahead of the curve. Thankfully, our own world is not at the stage where people are having their limbs chopped off and replaced with artificial ones for the sake of being able to hit a new PR on the bench press. Not yet, anyway. We might be closer than you think. A lot of the technology we now take for granted would have been unthinkable in the 1970s. But Cyberpunk, like all science fiction, is not trying to predict the future. Instead, it takes an aspect of life at present and expands upon it, twists it, makes it the thing that dominates a future society, and providing us with a warning. For years now, we have known that technology, and social media in particular, has caused us to depersonalize the flesh and blood on the other side of the screen. It's not too great a leap in logic to think that the next step is for us to depersonalize ourselves. That is the world of Cyberpunk we find ourselves in, one where the very idea of self has been degraded, but not fully, not completely. Despite the dominance of technology and the corporations that create and control it, self-determination, autonomy, agency, and self-worth can still be found. Lost though it may be, humanity still fights to exist. Cyberpunk 2077 is a love letter to that humanity, a message of encouragement as much as it is a warning, a plea for all of us to remember who we are. And to do so, we need but answer a few simple questions. This video was always going to be a challenging one to write, as I take a character-based approach to analyzing every form of media, and This is an RPG. Your V and my V may be very different people. That's kind of the entire point of the genre. But there are constants that run throughout our protagonist's story. There have to be, or the game just wouldn't work. So let's start there. Whether by choice or by firing, V in the opening minutes of the game finds himself leaving his old life behind and joining forces with Jackie Wells. There's no gameplay reason you need a partner here. 2077 very well could have had you smuggle that iguana over the border solo. Neither does Jackie serve as a source of exposition. The game's writers are far too talented to require such a mouthpiece. So why is he here? Because the very first thing that the developers wanted you to do after launching their game was to make a friend. Friendships are a uniquely human concept. Unlike every other animal on Earth, we don't just group together for protection, warmth, or any other necessity. It may start out that way, but ultimately what makes us become and stay friends with another person is because we like them. Friendship is unnecessary, like philosophy, like art, like the universe itself, for God did not need to create. It has no survival value, but rather is one of those things which give value to survival. One of Jackie's earliest lines reinforces this idea, telling the player before we ever reach Night City, at least in the Nomad playthrough, that community and belonging are of utmost importance to him.
Got Haywood in my blood.
I've never been to NC. That doesn't mean much to me.
So, imagine a place where everyone's like your bro or sis. Or a distant cousin, at least.
No doubt, Jackie exaggerates a bit. The big guy has a lot of love to go around, and I would not be remotely surprised to find that his neighbors are not quite so warm as he is, but it's a powerful sentiment nonetheless. Is that then what Jackie lives for? To see his family safe, to make his mama proud? Unfortunately, he doesn't entirely live up to his ideals. See, this is how players are introduced to the game's world before ever being placed in V's point of view.
Good morning, Night City! Yesterday's body count lottery rounded out to a solid and sturdy 30. 10 out of Haywood, thanks to unabated gang wars.
You have to skip that little announcement every single time you resume the game. 10 murders in one day in one neighborhood. Jackie's neighborhood. And yes, Jackie is in a gang. I don't say that to hate on Jackie. It's hard not to love the big fella, but rather to illustrate a point that Cyberpunk is making in this early stage. A good man is hard to find. That is also the title of a short story by Flannery O'Connor, which you should definitely read. Even those who have a big heart and are loyal to friends and family have found themselves sucked into this opulent, violent world, unable to resist its promise of wealth, fame, and glory.
Dying's a small price to pay for going down in history.
Gotta live like a legend first, though, huh? Death. It's nothing but the final flourish.
I find this Cavalier attitude toward death quite fascinating. For one thing, because it is entirely unnatural. Humans normally do fear death, and understandably so. We like living. Some of us cope with the undeniably inevitable through compartmentalization, hacking that fear away as useless at best and paralyzing at worst. Others recite memento mori on a daily basis, the motto urging them to live lives of virtue, spending their limited time on Earth to create good and destroy evil. Still others, as in our present scene, see death as a friend to be embraced, rather than a determined and inexhaustible hunter from which we must hide as long as possible. This third viewpoint is most often found in the young, the brash, the bold, those who think themselves invincible, if temporarily. It's not that a man like Jackie thinks he can't die, but rather that he believes he will get to shuffle off this mortal coil on his own terms. Dexter Deshawn, the big-time fixer who serves as the middleman in the early game op where you are tasked with clapping a mysterious piece of longevity tech from the Japanese mafia, asks you how you would choose to die.
Would you rather live in pieces, Mr. Nobody, die ripe, old, and smelling slightly of urine, or go down for all times in a blaze of glory, smelling near like posies, without seeing your 30th?
These men believe death comes when they allow it to come. They think it is a choice. It is not. Jackie, we can surmise from all our interactions with him, would choose to go out like a legend in a blaze of glory. But how does he die? Slowly, painfully, bleeding out in the back of a cab with no one to witness his pitiful final moments except for his best friend. That is the truth of the matter. However, when you return to the afterlife, you find that the bartender is more than willing to name a drink in Jackie's honor, because Of course she is, because she wasn't there. No one else was there. They all think Jackie died in a massive explosion descending from Arasaka Tower in glorious death after having assassinated Saburo Arasaka, the most powerful man in Night City. The Afterlife's customers, not to mention all of NC, believe Jackie Wellis to be a legendary thief and killer. They have no idea he hid in a pillar while the actual murder took place. They don't know he got caught by pure chance when trying to flee the scene, only to later die in sad, mean estate. As far as they are concerned, Jackie accomplished things Johnny Silverhand could only dream of. And, like Johnny, Jackie's legend and the truth have precious few points of overlap, but we'll come to that story in due time. Although Jackie did not actually die in spectacular fashion, there is a sad beauty in the true nature of his final moments. Rather than being taken from this world to the next in a single, unpredictable, gloriously violent instant, Jackie was given the time to acknowledge that his death was imminent. He had the chance to bid farewell to his best friend, to pass along a final wish. Pitiful though such a death may have been, it is undeniably more human than being atomized by a nuclear blast of one's own making. Was it a good death? Hardly, but at least Jackie did not die alone. At least V was there for him as he met his end. One of the only other people who did know the true circumstances of Jackie's demise is Dexter Deshawn, who is none too happy about the ruckus caused by his crew and the heat it will almost certainly bring down upon his head. So he takes precautions.
Seems I've chosen the quiet life after all. No blaze of glory for me.
But, as I've said, that is not a choice one can make, certainly not after having lived in the opposite fashion for so long. Death will come in its own way and its own time, no matter how you think you chose to die. For Mr. Deshawn, death arrives in the form of Goru Takamura, the former, now disgraced, bodyguard to the Arasaka family's patriarch, who finds and rescues the resurrected V in the landfill where Dex had him dumped.
Now, listen, dog. I have done exactly what you asked. So let's you and me figure
You cannot choose how you die. This is a core message of Cyberpunk 2077, but you can and must choose how you live. However, such a choice is not an easy one and is weighed down by countless factors, from your genetics to your family structure to the society in which you live. One of my all-time favorite shows is a little-known number called The Wire, which follows the cops, drug dealers, drug addicts, and general populace of the great city of Baltimore as they go about their lives, all working and striving within a system that seems to limit their ability to truly choose who they want to be. It's not that living a virtuous life is impossible if you grew up in the projects of West Baltimore, but rather that doing so would require a Herculean effort, a bit of luck, and someone to guide you, an exceedingly rare combination anywhere in the world. Cyberpunk reminds me of this theme. It asks the question, who does Night City allow you to be? And look, I'm a big believer in individual responsibility. Our choices are our own, regardless of circumstance. But if you were to drop me into NC in Jackie's place, I have absolutely no confidence in saying that I would emerge a better man than Mr. Wells. I don't say that to excuse Jackie entirely. Certainly joining up with the Valentinos, to name but one of several poor choices, was the wrong way to go, but rather to point out the power of stories like this. They give us a glimpse into lives we would never otherwise see, enabling us and urging us to have compassion for men and women suffering through difficulties that are utterly foreign to us. While right and wrong are objectively clear and distinct, the people who choose them are complicated, their ability to distinguish vice from virtue limited. The circumstances of our birth and upbringing are not everything, but they do matter. So how does the world of Cyberpunk affect its denizens? What are the political, social, and economic factors that constrain or even dominate the lives of the people in this dark and dismal world? Calling Night City dark is rather ironic, as there is hardly a corner of the metropolis untouched by the garish lights of billboards, storefront signs, or some other form of advertisement. You could make an entire video about the advertising in Cyberpunk 2077, and people have, but I'll touch on the absurdity and brashness of it only briefly here. Stimulants are shoved in your face, limb modifications are made to seem an absolute necessity, and firearms are plastered on screen after screen as if you'll die without the latest iron, which, you might. Life is especially delicate within the walls of Night City, even for those lucky enough to work for one of the megacorps, as there's always going to be someone below you on the pyramid who would just love to take your spot. The corporations are, of course, a centerpiece of 2077's world. They're the big, bad, evil conglomerates that control everything, from farming to technology to military, and according to whose rules, everyone must live.
This prestigious award can be attributed to the numerous employee benefits they offer, such as 5 paid vacation days a year, unlimited access to stimulant pharmaceuticals, and implant acquisition assistance. Were that not impressive enough, 34% of Militech employees have also been promised a retirement package.
It is bits of world building such as that, and the corporate-dominated world as a whole, that earn 2077 the label of anti-capitalist. Now, people can debate whether or not it is actually anti-capitalist until the heat death of the universe, but they're mostly just arguing over semantics. To someone who leans to the political left, capitalism might just mean anything to do with big companies, while someone who leans to the right might take it to mean free enterprise in general, so they argue past each other, quote tweeting one another again and again until one party finally blocks the other. Those debates don't interest me. I'm not here to try and square my own economic views against those of Cyberpunk, and I'm certainly not planning on slapping any labels onto either philosophy. Is this fictional world highly capitalist? Yeah, I would say so. It's not as purely capitalistic as Rapture is, or was supposed to be, but it certainly shares some similarities with the Undercity Sea from BioShock, which will be the next game featured on this channel. But yes, NC's trade and industry are privately owned, though one could ask, when does a company cease to be a company? Militech and Arasaka, for example, are de facto governmental bodies. And yeah, the general populace has no say in the makeup of their leadership or how they are run, but one could make a pretty convincing argument that our own influence on the actions of our government is hardly any more significant. All the same, you have to admit that this is at least a capitalist-flavored world, and it's incredibly messed up. However, those two facts do not combine to form an argument against the fundamentals of capitalism. Has unrestrained capitalism run amok, creating a world where greedy CEOs affect the lives of normal people far more than they should? Sure, but it's a wild stretch to argue that such a fact means the very idea of private industry as opposed to governmental control must be condemned. To illustrate my point better, let's consider the role of technology in 2077. Almost every single adult in this world is augmented with their own processors, RAM, and network interface card. Many have artificial limbs or organs, and some, as we saw earlier, take it way too far. Even the first level of connection to the net established by the base augments is pretty messed up. The idea that you can get a computer virus that's just as deadly as an organic one is bone-chilling. Now, most people in the game don't remotely recognize this fact. For them, this is just how life is. You get the computer installed in your brain and the chip slots cut into your neck when you turn 18 or 16 or stop growing or whatever, because that's the thing to do. There are precious few objectors you might come across, but they do exist. You meet a street preacher of sorts just outside Vic's Riverdock clinic.
But you are not the masters of your memories, for your eyes do not belong to you, or rather, not only to you. Do you truly believe that those who have sold you your mechanical eyes have resisted the temptation to peek through them? Cameras are all around us, even within us. Your joys, your worries, your life, for them it is all mere spectacle.
These characters, out of place though they may be, reveal the utter absurdity of that which everyone else accepts as ordinary reality. Does that mean, though, that Cyberpunk thinks technology evil, that the ability for us to connect with one another over the internet should never have been established, that the improvements modern science has made should all be abandoned? Hardly. The creations of man, whether they be pieces of technology or economic systems, are never free of downsides. They may be, on rare occasion, completely devoid of any benefit or upside, the University of Southern California, for example, but creating something that is truly flawless, that cannot possibly be taken to an unhealthy extreme, is beyond the strength and wisdom of mankind. Twisted though some one thing may be in the world of Cyberpunk, it doesn't mean that the game sees said thing as fundamentally evil. Yes, this game is a vision, a warning of what a mess unchecked greed could make of a capitalist system, but that is a problem with humanity, much more than with a certain style of economy.
The greatest crimes issue from a desire for excess and not from necessity.
Destination. What now?
Aristotle.
That quote comes from this section of Aristotle's Politics, in which he discusses whether or not a state ought to enforce equalization of property. Having possessions equal to his neighbor, Aristotle argues, will not prevent a man from committing evils in pursuit of having more possessions than his neighbor. Men always want more and more without end, for it is the nature of desire not to be satisfied, and most men live only for the gratification of it. This is clearly seen within the bounds of Night City. Greed is everywhere, from the corpo rats whose eyes are fixed ever on the next rung up the ladder, to the people on the street who are now more chrome than flesh. Cyberpunk is not so much a critique of capitalism as an idea, as it is a treatise on the dangers of this particular vice. The opposite of greed, of course, is charity, a topic about which Aristotle speaks in that same work. There is the greatest pleasure in doing a kindness or service to friends or guests or companions, which can only be rendered when a man has private property. These advantages are lost by excessive unification of the state. If you listen to the denizens of Twitter or Reddit, it would seem that communism, which Aristotle critiques here, though not by that name, and capitalism, that is late-stage unrestrained megacorp capitalism, are the only two options when it comes to economic systems. The latter lets greed run wild, the former forbids it entirely except for the ruling party because, Citizen Ivan has certain needs. Therefore, again, according to anonymous internet people, any critique of one must be voicing favor for the other. This is absurd. There may be problems in any economic system, but the one that will always be present is the fact that humans have vices, and we act on them. We are greedy, selfish, prideful, spiteful little gonks who could and will mess up even the best designed economic arrangement. This is what Cyberpunk shows us. It is not saying that capitalism bad, communism good, because it understands that nuance exists, that there is far more to life than my side versus your side. However good or bad the systems in place were before now, we screwed everything up. And yeah, some people benefited from said screwing up, and those people probably made things worse for everyone else because, again, it is the nature of desire to not be satisfied. Humans do not only desire money, possessions, and power, of course. There is one urge that predates our lust for all of those, and the verb I just used should clue you in as to what said urge is. Yeah, sex is everywhere in Night City. There are joy toys hanging around Jig Street, shops selling various paraphernalia for use in the bedroom, and of course, there are brain dances which are mostly used for the grossest form of self-indulgence. For a Catholic like me, who believes the sexual act, given its life-giving nature, to border on sacred, such blatant commercialization and casualness is disgusting. But that's the thing, it's supposed to be. Not only is this vision of the future remarkably and sadly realistic. I mean, of course, people are mostly going to use advanced VR to flog the log. It also shows us just how revolting it all is. The human sex drive is perfectly natural and normal, as is our desire for material goods. In 2077, both have been perverted even more than they are today, twisted in truly despicable ways, showing what happens when we place ourself and our own supposed good, be that physical pleasure or financial gain, above the objective good of other people. There's a main story mission where you track down a former client of yours, the one who backed the job that got you into this mess in the first place, and discover that she worked as what is called a doll, a companion for whose pleasurable company you can pay, and who has an implant that links to the customer's subconscious to ensure he gets exactly what he wants out of this entanglement. Oh, and that same implant wipes her memory of the encounter, so she doesn't have to remember any of this vile shit that the customer's subconscious had her do.
See, your opinion about dollhouses hasn't changed.
Oh, but it has. Before, I wouldn't have touched one with a 10-mile pole. Now I'm thinking a fire'd really make this place shine.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Johnny boy. So while the corps and all their greedy, ultra-capitalist glory might be the big bads in this world, ordinary people are, by and large, active participants. Yes, they are being given bread and circuses, or rather implants and brain dances, but they accept those satiating offerings. The individual does not lose his ability to choose just because a megacorp or the government or any other power beyond his control exercises undue influence on his life. What brought the world of Cyberpunk to this pitiable estate and what keeps it there is vice, greed, avarice, lust, and the desire for more excess of any kind. But we also find deficiencies, vices defined by their lack of virtue. Charity is practically non-existent. Loyalty is rare. The idea of being temperate or prudent would be ridiculed in a society such as this. Is all hopeless then? For the last 7 or so minutes, I have painted a remarkably bleak picture. It might seem as though a man could not possibly choose to live a virtuous life were he born and raised anywhere close to Night City. It might seem as if humans have reached total depravity, letting their chips and implants lead them into a living hell from which there is no escape. It might seem, looking at all the horrible things we have done and are doing to one another, that there is no hope for mankind. But to condemn the human race because of how we treat each other would be patently absurd, because in that very condemnation you are admitting that those who are mistreated have worth and value and ought not to be treated that way. Despair is no cure for the evils of the world. It is merely another vice to add to the more active ones. Yes, humans can and will make a mess of any given political, economic, or social system, twisting it to fit their own selfish ends, but they are also the only reason such a system can ever produce any good fruit. So, can Night City produce such fruit? Is it possible for a man to find the golden mean of virtue amidst the excess and defect that dominate these streets? Yes, absolutely. But do we see it in our present story? Not so much. I would imagine that the best men in the world of Cyberpunk are entirely unremarkable. They toil away at whatever job they can hold on to, trying to earn enough scratch to buy their kids some microwavable burritos from the vending machine across the hall because grocery stores are nowhere to be found in NC, and doing their level best to make their lives of those around them just a little bit better. The most extraordinary thing in the world is an ordinary man and an ordinary woman and their ordinary children. I would say that this is doubly true in a world such as this. However, 2077 does not focus on such characters, as they tend to make for rather boring stories. Could Jackie have chosen the truly quiet life? Yes, he could have, but then he wouldn't be here. Night City may allow virtue, but it certainly doesn't encourage it. The constant advertisements, the shiny new implants of passing strangers on the streets, the AVs of corporate execs flying overhead all combine to urge its citizens to a life of excess, to try to be more than they are or should be. Even in today's world, we don't like the idea that we are limited, that there are some things we just cannot do. But that's reality, and we should have the humility to accept our limitations as fact. I suppose, however, that having the ability to swap your organic hands for ones that can break concrete makes maintaining such humility more of a challenge than it otherwise would be. Jackie Wells wants to be more than he is. Yes, his childlike exuberance at experiencing the driverless cab is loads of fun, but it also indicates his lack of maturity and his desperation to escape the life into which he was born.
My whole life I've spent in this shit around us, and I ain't going back.
You were likely sympathetic to Jackie's plight. I know I was. But the sad fact of the matter is that his desires are not so different than those of Yorinobu Arasaka, the man who commits patricide right in front of the hidden V and Jackie, all because he is not satisfied with his own present lot in life and is sick of waiting for his father to die. It is the nature of desire not to be satisfied. Greed sinks its ugly claws into the poor just as easily as the rich, and the result will always be the same. We seek more and more until finally we reach too far. No matter how much we obtain and possess, we cannot add even one day to our lifespans. Which was, of course, the goal of the infamous relic that V and Jackie stole. It was supposed to grant, through some mysterious means, immortality. And in a way, it did grant it. Jackie is immortalized in legend at the afterlife, and V, well, it gives him a new life entirely, albeit one defined by death. The first mention of Johnny Silverhand comes when Jackie orders 2 drinks named after the infamous rocker boy/terrorist, and it is implied that Johnny must have snuffed it in mind-blowingly spectacular fashion to have received this posthumous honor. Then, after V is shot in the head, the relic sets out to repair the damage done to his brain by giving it a roommate who is introduced to the player by means of a flashback. We play through Johnny's last day on Earth, from his farewell concert to the bombing of Arasaka Tower to his mysterious and personal quest to access the Corpse network.
Not done yet. Still need to feed this to their subnet.
I fucking knew it! This was never about Arasaka. This was about your groupie output, wasn't it?
Not like you could ever understand.
If you don't or didn't know what groupie output means, that's perfectly alright. Everything will become clear in time. Regardless of whether or not you understood that slang and what it refers to, this is a brilliant introduction to the character of Johnny Silverhand. It shows us the raging maniac who is willing to set off a nuke in the middle of a city just because he hates Arasaka that much, but hints at a deeper and more personal underlying motive. We also see that Johnny's death was not as spectacular and dramatic as the legends would have you believe. He did not, it turns out, die in the thermonuclear blast that he set off, but was wounded, captured, and brought to face Saburo Arasaka before something happens.
人は嘘をつき、自分自身を欺く。だが死者は違う。死者は雄弁だが、彼らは決して嘘をつかない。死者の言葉にはつつましさがある。始めろ。
Before any of our questions can be answered, we find ourselves back in V's head as he learns the fatal truth. The construct of Johnny Silverhand is slowly but inevitably overriding his own consciousness, and the chip that kicked off this process cannot be removed unless V wants to flatline instantly. Such an exit appeals to him, at least as a passing thought, prompting Misty, Jackie's girlfriend, to say this.
Well, that way you'd kill 2 souls. Is that what you want?
I find that line fascinating, as we have just seen that Johnny was infected, I suppose, by something called Soul Killer. We'll talk more about the metaphysics of all this in due time, but I had to include Misty's words here if for no other reason than this. We are in uncharted waters. None of the characters truly understand the technology at play here. Vic may know what the relic is doing, but he doesn't really know how, and he doesn't even try to grasp at the implications of it. The Ripperdoc, understandably, views the engram as a parasite. Misty thinks it is a person. Is it? If the construct were to complete its job, taking over V's psyche entirely, would that really be Johnny Silverhand come back to life? Was Johnny's soul killed, or merely held captive on a fancy piece of hardware, and now shares the same flesh and blood as V's soul? Lots of questions, but again, now is not really the time to address them. We have a different problem on our hands. What is V to do now? Well, if it were up to Johnny, he would,
Stick some iron in your mouth and pull the trigger.
At the outset, Johnny believes himself to be trapped in V's head, and that if said prison were to no longer function, he would be set free. It doesn't take long for that to change. After V's conversation with Takamura that establishes the barest of outlines of a plan to free him from the relic, Johnny appears again.
And I've processed some shit, changed my mind. Don't want you dead anymore. And I've taken a step back, looked at things. Think we might be able to help each other.
While V is justifiably less than eager to accept Johnny's offer, this change of heart on the Rocker Boy's part tells us that whatever this construct may be, it is not a program that can only act one way. It can change, learn, and adapt to its circumstances as it comes to understand them better. That ability makes it seem more human, though it's not as if software that can change its behavior is unheard of. Either way, V does take Johnny's advice and asks Rogue for help in tracking down Anders Hellman, the relic's engineer. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what Johnny thinks of Rogue. He clearly admires her, but he also seems a bit pissed at her for having found success and longevity after he was killed right in front of her at Arasaka Tower. She doesn't need to know that he was not actually killed in front of her. The thing about miserable people, such as Johnny, is that they have no appreciation for happiness. They begrudge others their own joy. They refuse to see how people can find peace and contentedness while they are being crushed by the weight of the world. This is Johnny to a T. He had, and still has, his glorious mission of toppling the corporate juggernaut, and speaks disdainfully not only of those who do or did work for Arasaka, but also for ordinary people who are simply going about their own lives.
To our viewers, opening ceremony, that's what they expect.
What about firefight could break out any second, there's none the wiser.
The air of moral superiority that surrounds Johnny here is obnoxiously fascinating. No, Rocker Boy, you're not better than everyone else because you happen to know political forces are about to collide in violent fashion at this airport. However, he kind of has a point. This is, after all, a terminal that hosts flights across the world and to the freaking moon. The sheep, as Johnny terms them, are, by and large, wealthier, better connected, and much more adept at maneuvering through this corpo-dominated world than your typical person. And yet, all that money and power does nothing except lead them in search of more. They are powerless to resist their desires, letting their cravings for pleasure and profit blind them to the reality of the world around them. Those lines are a solid encapsulation of Johnny Silverhand's character. He's right about a lot of stuff, he's just kind of an ass about it. I've seen people dismiss out of hand any point the character makes because he's a terrorist. Yeah, he is. Johnny is a despicable person. Guess what? Humans are complicated. Acting in an incredibly violent manner in support of your political beliefs does not mean said beliefs are totally invalid. There are doubtless thousands of people who share Johnny's distrust for and hatred of Arasaka. It would be absurd to say that their opinions are invalidated because they are shared by a homicidal maniac. There's probably some real-world example running through your mind right now. Goodness knows there are thousands of cases you could choose from. Whatever it is, I'm not referring to it. This is not an allegory. My point is that the game understands the truth about human moral complexity. It is possible for us to be completely right about one thing and dead wrong about another, to make healthy choices one moment and destructive ones the next, to be just in our ends but unjust in our means. Good intentions do not preclude evil results, and vice versa. To illustrate this point, let's consider the case of one Joshua Stevenson. Some introduction is warranted here. This is an optional side job given to you by the fixer Wakako. It's a pretty simple gig by the sound of it. The client is seeking payback on the man who murdered his wife. Now, there are a lot of these gigs which you can pick up from the various fixers throughout Night City, but when this one is offered to you, V is, or at least can be, rather hesitant to take the job. After all, he's a mercenary, not an assassin. Sure, he leaves bodies behind, but that's never the main goal of the mission. Even when you're tasked with taking down the cyber psychos who are terrorizing various neighborhoods, your fixer asks you to incapacitate rather than kill, in the hopes that they can be cured of their psychosis. I mention this initial out that the game gives you because it establishes a pattern. During the course of this questline, you will be offered an exit far more than usual. We'll come to the reason for that in a bit, but for now, let's proceed with the setup. V accepts the job, meets with the client, and finds that this poor working-class man is consumed by the desire for revenge and wants nothing more than to do the deed himself. After a car chase, he attempts to exact vengeance and ends up dead, shot by the cop detailed to protect the convicted man, Joshua Stevenson. We meet Stevenson, and he seems different than you'd expect. Calm, gentle, remorseful over the death of the man who was trying to kill him. He asks V to come with him, and Johnny, well, let's just say Johnny is intrigued.
Ha! That's it. Got no fucking idea what this is about. But if you don't go with them, I'm never talking to you again.
This is unusual behavior for Mr. Silverhand, who tends more toward dismissiveness and derision than he does enthusiastic interest in the lives of others. But assuming V does proceed with the mission as Johnny requests, we find out that Stevenson is a changed man, that he found God in prison, and that he is apparently under some contract with a studio. The details of that contract are disclosed during a visit to the sister of one of Stevenson's victims, whose letters to Josh kickstarted his conversion, and who is strongly opposed to his plan. In lieu of the electric chair, he has accepted the offer to be crucified, and for his death to be scrolled, turned into a brain dance unlike any other.
Now, with the studio's help, My death will be more than a state-sanctioned murder.
They want to scroll a brain dance of Joshua being crucified. An execution like any other, just garbed in holy robes.
Alright, let's start with the seemingly absurd fact that this woman has forgiven and befriended the man who murdered her brother. Place yourself in her shoes. Could you extend the same mercy? I can hardly imagine myself mustering the courage to say, I forgive you, to someone who had killed in cold blood one of my loved ones. Clemency is not instinctive. We automatically want to seek an eye for an eye when we are wronged. To err is human. To forgive, divine. This is why I can hardly fault Zuleika's mother for her anger at Joshua when she finds her son's murderer in her own home. It would be a truly superhuman act for her to forgive him. But examples of such mercy can be found within our own human history. Whether or not the Sinnerman job was inspired by the story, I don't know. But it certainly reminded me of St. Maria Goretti, an 11-year-old early 20th century Italian girl who was killed by her neighbor after she refused his forceful advances. Even as she lay dying, the surgeon unable to save her, Maria proclaimed of her murderer, I forgive him, and I want him with me in heaven. While that man, Alessandro Serenelli, was serving his 30-year prison sentence, he experienced a conversion, coming to know of Maria's forgiveness and of the infinite mercy of God. When he was released, Alessandro immediately went to visit Maria's mother, Assunta, who forgave him just as her daughter had, and she even took the man in, treating him as her own son. So, if you thought this scene unrealistic, think again. Such mercy and forgiveness really do exist, and they matter. Turning the other cheek is not showing weakness. It is the most effective means of conversion for the hard-hearted, and it absolutely can exist alongside justice. Maria Goretti did name her attacker for the police even as she forgave him. One of the best examples of this coexistence in fiction comes from Les Miserables, in which the bishop not only refuses to accuse Jean Valjean of stealing his silver, which he did, but adds his candlesticks to the gift he had given the poor man. He does not stop there, however, but continues to exhort Jean Valjean, you must use this precious silver to become an honest man. How is a man to become good if he has never shown goodness? How can we be charitable if we have never received charity? How can I love if I am never loved? It may be countercultural, unintuitive, and absurdly difficult to forgive those who have wronged us, but we have to try, because someone has to start. Violence begets violence, hatred begets hatred, death begets death begets death. The only way to stop such a vicious cycle is with kindness, forgiveness, and mercy, undeserved though they may be. That was Zuleika's contribution to this story. Without her, Stevenson goes to the electric chair a bitter, lonely, despondent criminal, his death having no meaning other than Night City assuring its citizens justice is still done, which 99% of the time is a bald-faced lie. Josh doesn't want to die for a lie, so he takes the offer to die for the truth.
I want to bear witness to love's existence, in a manner that all the lost souls on this wretched earth can understand.
Why love?
If unconditional love exists, then so must God. It's time the world was reminded of his divine presence.
As with many other scenarios within Cyberpunk's story, this one is a tangled moral mess. There can be no doubt that Stevenson is authentic in his belief and his desire to share it with the masses, to pass on the message of Christ's sacrificial love for all mankind. Rachel, the studio rep in charge of this operation, admits that her charge possesses the quality of authenticity, which is none too common these days. Even Johnny seems to admire Joshua.
Where's Rebel Johnny? Seem to have lost him.
Well, I found him. He's inside that guy. He's the real rebel.
And if Stevenson were being crucified for his faith, well, there'd be no problem. The problem would be clearer cut, anyway. At the very least, he'd be in good company, as at least 2 of the 12 apostles were martyred in like fashion. But this execution is not being carried out because the powers that be wish to suppress and discourage Christianity. Instead, they wish to use it. Joshua's willingness to subject himself to an unbelievably painful death will allow the studio to replicate that experience in brain dance form for thousands of paying sickos, or customers if you want to call them that. As an aside, I do love the detail of there being advertisements for The Passion all around Night City well before you even meet Stevenson. Anyway, since this is clearly corporate exploitation, the studio lady shows up right at the end of the Our Father as you say the words, "Deliver us from evil," for crying out loud. One might wonder whether Joshua should go through with it. On the one hand, he's going to be executed one way or the other. He might as well use his last breaths to proclaim the good news. On the other, what are the odds his sacrifice will change anything other than decimal placement on a studio executive's bonus check?
What would it change? Corpse will continue to grow rich off his type, and the masses will live on with their pipe dreams.
I mean, yeah, of course, that's what Johnny thinks. The guy is convinced that corps control the lives of everyday folk, which to an extent they do, but their influence can only reach so far. If the men whose deaths Joshua Stevenson now imitates proved anything, it was that a man can believe whatever he chooses to believe. No corporation, no government, and no emperor can stop him. So what does Johnny believe in? What does he make of his current predicament, metaphysically speaking?
I don't give it an ounce of thought. Surprise. To me, I'm just that. Me. No netherworld, no happy wonder world, just duped digital psyches.
That tracks. As mentioned earlier, Johnny is a dismissive and derisive type. His feelings toward this whole deal are scorn for the corpse and amusement at Josh's idealism, though that latter emotion seems to be tinted with admiration, if only ever so slightly. Still, when the moment comes and Joshua is about to be nailed to the cross, Johnny mocks him, as did one of the thieves crucified alongside Jesus.
Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and save us.
The words of the good thief are then recited by V, as he pounds the nails into Stevenson's wrists and feet.
Do you not fear God? You stand condemned under the same sentence.
We are punished justly, for we receive what our deeds deserve. But this man has done no wrong.
Remember me when you come into your kingdom.
This brings me back to the uniquely numerous opportunities the game gave you to walk away from this mission. You only ended up here, at the foot of the cross, watching a man suffer and die at your hand because you chose to persist. You could have stopped. You could have turned around and walked away. You could have refused in the last moment to be the one who picked up the hammer and nails. It was your actions, your choices that led us to this sorrowful place. That fact squares amazingly well with Christian theology. St. Alphonsus Liguori in The Way of the Cross wrote, "My adorable Jesus, it was not Pilate, no, it was my sins that condemned you to die. It is not the weight of the cross, but of my sins which have made you suffer so much pain." V's role as the good thief, a man who led a life of sin, being the one to physically nail Joshua to the cross, displays this truth in stark, brutal, and undeniable fashion. I imagine that this scene had a profound effect on you, even if you're not a Christian, though it certainly did help, especially when Joshua went up on the cross at exactly 3 p.m. during my playthrough, which I did not at all plan. At the very least, it is incredibly moving to see a man who genuinely believes that there is good in the world, who takes a gamble that love exists, and who is willing to suffer so that others might believe the same. The incredible strength it must have taken for Zuleika to reach out to her brother's murderer, offering him forgiveness, seeking to break the cycle of hatred and violence, is truly remarkable, regardless of what faith you profess. And I love that the characters see this too, that they are awed by Joshua's sacrifice. Johnny is struck dumb when looking at the man nailed to the cross. He just stands there, hands folded, head bowed, his posture reverent. The flippant, mocking man from mere moments ago is nowhere to be found. Even Rachel, the exploiter-in-chief, can't help but be moved by what she just witnessed.
Probably my hardest gig, that, but I got through it.
What now?
Going home, where I'll sleep for 2 days straight.
I can't tell you how important that line is when considering the theme of lost humanity in Cyberpunk. Rachel represents a greedy media conglomerate that saw Joshua Stevenson's conversion not as good news that must be shared, but as an opportunity for profit that must be seized. Throughout this mission, she hounded V to stay out of the way, to not mess with Josh's head, even going so far as to offer him twice what he would have gotten for seeing the job through in expected fashion. Nothing was going to stand between her and exploiting this poor, genuine man and his faith so her company could rake in the sweet, sweet eddies. And yet, at the end of it all, we are reminded that she is still a person because we see her recognize the crucified figure in front of her as a man, not merely an object. This glimpse of humanity may have been fleeting, but it was real. A spark may fade out in moments, or it may turn into a raging fire, but there has to be a spark. If Stevenson's suffering was able to create thousands of such sparks and just a few would become much more, then perhaps his sacrifice would be worth it. I mean, yeah, enduring a horrific death so that a corporation can capture the experience and sell it to people who are real freaks for that kind of thing isn't exactly ideal. But if it's your one and only chance to spread the gospel, should you do it? I would lean toward yes, but ultimately that's not a question I feel capable of answering in a definitive manner. So let's ask a different question, one that I've been building to for some time now. Would Johnny Silverhand die in this manner for his faith, for what he believes in? Most people in Night City would say, yeah, duh, obviously, but those people think he got caught in his own nuclear explosion. They don't know the true circumstances of his death, nor do they have the ability to ask him. Not that V does ask him exactly, but we do have a conversation with Johnny that sheds light on what Silverhand believes and why he does what he does. This chat of theirs takes place after V's capture of Anders Hellman, who proves not to be V's salvation, but yet another bearer of ill tidings. The construct, he confirms, will inevitably take over. There will be no V, there will be only Johnny Silverhand.
Have you noticed the construct's influence on your decision-making?
Sheesh, give it a rest.
When it comes to my decisions, Johnny really is just a voice in my head. Maybe he has a different opinion, but he can't make me do anything.
Agreed 100%. You are one fucking stubborn
It's not
host.
as if one of you wins the debate. The scale simply shifts, slowly but surely.
What do you mean?
You will start doing things that were once unthinkable, at least to your old self. And you know exactly who he was.
But just as hope seems to fade away, Johnny comes to the rescue, telling V that he knows where they can go to free him from the chip. Mikoshi, the cyber prison holding an untold number of engrams who were separated from their bodies by Soul Killer.
You'll get rid of the chip. I'll smash Sokka. Win-win, kid. Soul Killer's what we need, and Mikoshi's how we grab it.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. It seems that Johnny may in fact be willing to die to take down Arasaka, but you may ask, why? What is it about this corporation in particular that makes his blood boil? That is the question that V poses in this conversation, so let's finally get to Johnny's answer, to the core of why he does what he does.
I saw a corpse strip farmers of water, and eventually of land. Saw them transform Night City into a machine fueled by people's crushed spirits, broken dreams, and emptied pockets. Corps have long controlled our lives, taken lots, and now they're after our souls.
Might be right. Can't really argue with you there.
V, I've declared war not because capitalism's a thorn in my side or out of nostalgia for an America gone by. This war's a people's war against a system that spiraled out of our control. It's a war against the fucking forces of entropy. Understand? Do whatever it takes to stop them, defeat them, gut them. If I gotta kill, I'll kill. If I need your body, I'll fucking take it.
The funny thing is, Arasaka would not be the corp stealing water and land from family farms. They're a manufacturing company. Petrochem or Biotechnica or one of the other agricultural corps would be responsible for that particular sin. So why does Johnny use that example? Because to Silverhand, they're all the same thing. Each and every corporation has grown to its mammoth proportions by sucking the lifeblood out of ordinary people. Arasaka is Militech, is Zetatech, is Kuroshi. Arasaka just happened to be the dominant power in Night City, so they became, and remain, his primary target. So what was that bit about the forces of entropy? How does that relate to the corporations? The companies themselves may not be highly entropic. They are likely quite well ordered, their motives and actions predictable, but they have sown the seeds of disorder and chaos throughout society. How? Simple. They have devalued the idea of the self. Their advertisements pushing products promise a pretend paradise. Their inventions and implants impart the idea that I do not have to live with who I am. I can be whoever or whatever I choose to be. Their mass production manufacturing plants made meaningful work scarce, stealing purpose from the hearts of the common man. They fed us a steady diet of fleeting pleasures, sating our appetite and our lust, and we accepted it with open arms. Of course the world is in chaos. People have nothing to unify them, nothing to believe in, nothing to live for but the next big BD hit or the newest implant that will make the air taste like chocolate. And yes, that sounds amazing, but let me ask you this. Which bite of cake is the best? That should be an easy answer. The first. It's always the first, because you aren't accustomed to it. You cannot yet be numb to it. If all we do is douse ourselves in pleasure day in and day out, pleasure ceases to exist, unless we can top it with an even more extreme pleasure. Such a pursuit inevitably leads to this. A world in which people will stop at nothing to satisfy their desires, regardless of who gets hurt. A world for which chaotic is far too weak a word. So, as is often the case, Johnny has accurately diagnosed Night City's disease, but his proposed treatment is a bit aggressive. That said, he has come to realize that he cannot accomplish this on his own, seeing as he's a digital psyche, and his attitude toward V has shifted from murderous to accepting.
Here to get me from point A to point B.
It's not ideal, but it's better. Johnny has never been the most sympathetic or humble of men, so for him to at least admit that he needs V is progress. The evolution of how V and Johnny relate to each other is one of the most fascinating parts of this main story, and since this is an RPG and V's feelings are largely those of the player, I find it more worthwhile to focus on how Johnny changes as the story moves along. After capturing Hanako Arasaka and briefly interrogating her, the plan to find Mikoshi, this prison for digital psyches, and separate the relic from V's body coalesces into a more solid form. And when the topic of Mikoshi is breached, Johnny does something unexpected. He shows vulnerability and compassion.
What was it like when you died?
Was on top of the world. Failure not an option, not a thought. Till it happened. Death feels real now. It's only now I know it.
Now? Had half a century to come to terms.
Mikoshi felt, I don't know, like sleep? Lacked awareness, had no sense of passing time. Didn't mark it. Did what they wanted to me. I just remember cold, a black void, fear. Or was that your death? Of all the destruction and pain corpses wreak round the world, what happens at Mikoshi is worst. Know why?
They can change who you are. Turn you into someone else without you even knowing it. Realize what you're doing to me is what Arasaka's doing at Mikoshi.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm gonna fix it.
Vicious cycles are not merely limited to violence. They exist within our relationships with others. V, regardless of life path, comes from a place of brokenness. Personally, I played as Nomad V, a man who left his family behind due to some squabble over their future. Johnny lived two lives, one of a less than famous rocker boy and the other of a violent anarchist. Both men could look behind them and see the bodies they left in their wake, the dreams they crushed, and the friendships they discarded. But since they quite literally cannot get rid of each other right now, they figure they might as well work together. And if they have to work together, well, maybe it won't hurt to open up a little. Johnny's already dead, what's he got to lose? The idea of Mikoshi as this prison where the minds of netrunners can be stored in cyberspace, manipulated, and altered against their will is one of the most disturbing in all of Cyberpunk. You can pick which part of it unnerves V the most, but at no point does the game even give you the option to say, nah, that's no big deal. To do so would fly in the face of this game's central message. When we see people as things, tools, weapons, or some other useful object, we lose our humanity. How do you fight against a corporation hell-bent on bending every heart, mind, and soul to its will? Sure, you can attack them directly, blowing up their buildings and destroying their servers, but even if you somehow win, even if Arasaka turns to dust, would some other corp not fill the void it left behind? How do you reclaim your humanity from those who would steal it? This is how. This, right here. You do what V and Johnny are doing. Sit, talk, open up to one another, find the strength to bare your souls to each other. Embrace who you are with all your imperfections, physical and otherwise. Seek to change, to improve on your own merit, to set things right where you have so long gone wrong. That, we find out in another series of flashbacks, is Johnny's motivation. We find ourselves rewinding through Johnny's memories during a trip deep into cyberspace, which was provided by the Voodoo Boys, the gang who tipped Evelyn Parker off about the relic in the first place, and who have their own motivations for contacting Alt Cunningham, Johnny's ex-girlfriend, or in cyberpunk terms, groupie output. In these flashbacks, we witness the end of Johnny's relationship with Alt, who is decidedly fed up with his anti-corpo rhetoric.
I alone have the balls to stand up to Arasaka, and boy, that terrifies you. All of you.
Of course, Johnny S. Misunderstood by all Night City. That's it. That's the problem.
Johnny is in the middle of trying to talk her down when the pair are accosted, Alt is taken, and Johnny left for dead, only to be rescued by a Good Samaritan and put back together by a Ripper Doc who is also very done with his shtick.
Arasaka, wasn't it?
It's always Arasaka with you.
'Cause it always is Arasaka.
The picture these scenes paint of 2013 Johnny is exquisite. The man is obsessed with the corporation that all but rules Night City, and he expresses himself through the music he plays for literally dozens of people. Arasaka, he thinks, would never suffer such brave opposition. They must want him. They kidnapped Alt because they knew it would hurt him.
Oldest, tritest tale in the world. Arasaka was out to provoke me, and it worked.
Yeah, Arasaka didn't give a rat's ass about Johnny Silverhand. They just wanted Alt because she's a highly talented netrunner who just so happened to create the early version of Soul Killer, which Thompson, the media guy who saved Johnny's life, tells Johnny, but, well, that's like trying to convince J.R.R. Tolkien that the internal combustion engine wasn't a grave mistake. I'm not equating the two. Mind you, I just tend to have Tolkien on the brain at all times. Anyway, the fact that Alt is being held at Arasaka Tower is not doubted by either man, so it's time for a rescue mission, which goes poorly.
Alt, come on, don't do this.
Is she?
Fuck!
Johnny.
So that explains why Johnny went all nuclear, quite literally, on Arasaka Tower. Not only was the Corp responsible for Alt's death, her digital construct was, he claims, held captive in their subnet, hence his little side mission during the raid. Now, it seems likely that many of his accomplishments are exaggerated, and his failures downplayed, as we are viewing his own interpretation of past events, but what is undeniably certain is that Johnny cared for Alt. He was just really, really bad at it. He would go to the ends of the earth to save her life, but he couldn't make her happy if his own life depended on it. Again, we see the theme of human connection emerging, how peace and joy cannot be attained if we are too full of our own ambitions and desires to look to those of the people around us. Johnny's failures in that arena are not contained to Alt, however. As V points out, and Johnny still denies, Rogue was dedicated to him in a way that no normal mercenary should be.
Said to yourself, she was the best, had her pick of contracts. But for some strange-ass reason, she took a job from a rocker with a death wish. A rocker forever getting his ass beat by Arasaka.
This whole conversation between the two of them takes place just before they proceed through the Black Wall, the boundary in cyberspace built to keep rogue AIs out of the network inhabited by, every single person in the world, and finally make contact with Alt Cunningham herself, or rather the massive rogue AI that used to be Alt. She informs them that the only way to separate Johnny and V is a rather drastic measure.
With the Soul Killer resident inside Mikoshi, I will create a construct of you, then disentangle your neural network from Johnny's. I shall then inject your engram back into your mortal form.
So, you'll save my life, but flatline me along the way.
Your consciousness, neural engrams, will be recorded as data. The rest will cease to exist.
The rest?
The soul. I did not grant the program its name, but Soul Killer does precisely what it promises to do.
I don't want to listen to this bullshit. V just hops back into his body, right? Nothing changes.
Everything changes. You know this well.
One of my few complaints about this story is that after this dramatic revelation, things just kind of move forward. V says, okay, sounds like a plan, and off they go to find a way to break into Mikoshi so they can kill his soul. I felt like we should have lingered on that topic for a little while longer. Let V wrestle with the idea that he will no longer exist as a whole person, body, mind, and soul should they go through with this. Johnny's reaction makes more sense. He just outright rejects Alt's assertion regarding Soul Killer. That is very much in character. But I do wish the game had given me the option to, ask a few more of the questions that popped into my head at this moment. Nonetheless, I certainly appreciated the inclusion of this line. I despise the lie that we are merely consciousnesses driving around meat sacks. We do not just have bodies. We are bodies, just as much as we are mind and soul. Before meeting Alt, I wasn't sure if 2077 agreed with me on that front. I suspected it might, considering how it showed the detrimental results of people modifying their bodies every which way, but now that suspicion is more or less confirmed. I'm taking kill the soul to mean separate it from body and mind as opposed to cause it to vanish from existence forever. Either way, whatever Johnny is now, he is not the Johnny Silverhand who lived in Night City some 50 years ago. The V that walked out of Mikoshi would not be the same as the one who walked in. As for the metaphysical mechanics of all this, they are left open for speculation. I suppose one could argue that whenever Soul Killer creates a new engram, a new soul is created to accompany it. It's not like our current method of creating new people requires us to activate a soul, it's simply there, immediately. I am, of course, coming from the perspective of someone who believes in eternity, God, and heaven, but, I can't exactly not do that. Maybe Johnny has already faced his particular judgment, and Johnny Prime will have to do the same whenever this engram is destroyed, or maybe the version trapped in Mikoshi already did die, and this is actually Johnny 3.0, or maybe this Johnny doesn't actually exist as a separate person, but is merely another part of V Prime, the original V having died when Dex shot him. If we trust Alt's word, and I'm not totally sure that we should, then we can at least know that the self as we knew it will cease to exist after a fashion once Soul Killer is applied. But that pretty much leaves us back where we started, so yeah, I kind of get why they didn't dive any deeper into this topic. Answers aren't easy to come by. The soul clearly matters, according to the metaphysical viewpoint adopted by Cyberpunk 2077, but how it matters is unclear, as is how it reacts to and is affected by the technology of the day. Still, I appreciate that they didn't go full transhumanist and suggest that the mind is the only thing that matters and that it can be copied into code without any consequences for the self. I pray we never create technology that can actually do this, because while pondering these questions within the scope of a video game world is quite fun, I think I'd have an aneurysm trying to sort out all the implications of it in the real world. Thankfully, this is a game, so I do not have to worry about metaphysical accuracy and am free to interpret the meaning of all we've been shown as I so desire. And in the case of personhood within Cyberpunk 2077, I find it more interesting and profound to treat the construct of Johnny within V's brain as a person worthy of respect and dignity, even if he is really just one half and slowly becoming more than one half of a new person who came to be after the relic brought V back from the dead. From V's perspective, it's hard not to think of Johnny as a separate entity. When a guy shows up and says he wants to kill you, accepting him as just another part of you would be quite the stretch. But things are different now. Much of Johnny's cynical, scornful facade has faded away, especially with the realization that the person whose life he now shares will have to suffer a death much like his own. After leaving cyberspace, V has an acute relic malfunction that leaves him helpless, coughing violently on the ground until, suddenly, he finds himself in a totally different location than the one where he passed out.
That smells the sea breeze. Get up. Pacific's beautiful this time of day.
I'm telling you, I could almost feel the ocean mist carried by the breeze. Night City is nothing if not oppressive and consuming, but you get used to it, and really that's the scary part. Before long, you are accustomed to the dominating buildings, the ubiquitous advertisements, the constant and unrelenting din of a city that is never allowed to sleep. Driving out into the neighboring desert was always something of a relief, but actually getting to see the ocean, to rest for a few moments in its splendor, was a sublime joy I didn't know I needed. Every so often, Cyberpunk will present you with a moment such as this, a brief respite from chaos, busyness, and noise. It lets you be quiet and still, letting the tumultuous, deafening world pass by unnoticed and unheeded. But we cannot tarry long. Johnny has brought V here for a reason. This was the same hotel, the very same room where he lay for weeks on end after having deserted from one of the Corpo Wars, and where his own relic of the past still lies hidden.
Tags belong to a man who sacrificed his life for mine in Mexico. Been thinking about our predicament. Want to be clear. I will do you no wrong. When the time comes, it'll be my life for yours. I'll agree to get wiped. Tags are proof of my promise.
As it turns out, we've been asking the wrong question. It should not have been what, but rather who would you die for? You may notice that my V doesn't exactly gush with gratitude for Johnny's sacrifice. That was a choice, I thought, consistent with how I'd been playing V, one that I thought quite reasonable, especially considering the fact that he was just told his current self will have to die in order to save his future self, or however he might interpret the idea of being soul killed and his engram reinserted into his cranium. But still, even this version of V has to admit that Johnny did show restraint. He could have popped the red pill and unleashed the beast, taking over for as long as he wanted, but he didn't, and so his words here ring true. Whatever sort of entity Johnny Silverhand might be, he is a changed man. One who has witnessed, who has lived the suffering of another, and who, through that experience, became a better man. Whatever label, virus, parasite, intruder, etc., V may have applied or may still apply to him, there is another, and far more important descriptor that can no longer be denied. Friend. Friendship is often the product of happenstance. We do not select our friends from a pool of every person in the world, but from those who are placed into our lives. In this case, our head. But filial love is the freest kind of love. It cannot be demanded. It only exists at all if given out of unadulterated care for one's friends. Johnny has no reason to offer his life for V's. In an unspecified but undoubtedly short amount of time, he will no longer be a passenger if events were to proceed unaltered. It's also entirely possible, if we can trust the word of Anders Hellman, for Johnny to win a duel of the psyches in Mikoshi, for him to claim V's body and mind as his own. But he backs down, gaining nothing by doing so, laying down his life for his friend. I've said no few times that the world shown to us in Cyberpunk 2077 has lost the full meaning of the self, burying it under a mountain of drugs, sex, and implants. Johnny finds it here. Who I am, he now knows, is defined by what I can give to others. We are never truly ourselves unless we are willing to make a gift of our own lives to those whom we would call spouse, child, neighbor, friend. Humans are a dreadfully complicated mess. By many measures, Johnny Silverhand is the worst person in this game, and yet it is he who demonstrates a profound and fundamental truth about the nature of love. It is a gift, and he gives that gift freely without asking anything in return. I mean, he does ask V if he would be willing to give Johnny control, go talk to Rogue, and see about this getting revenge on Adam Smasher business, but that's a favor, not a condition. I wasn't sure I would do that, to be honest. I may have only not said no because I assumed the mission he suggested would be required for the main story. I found out I was wrong when I went to meet Hanako at Embers, read the pop-up message, and noped right the hell out of there. No chance I was done with this game yet. The Rogue and Johnny questline ended up being the last thing I did before the final mission. I played all of Phantom Liberty in between now and then, but we'll get to that topic in a bit. So yes, I did let Johnny take the wheel, which turned out exactly how you might think. Anyway, Johnny gets a lead on Adam Smasher. The 2 or 3 of them go to the ship where Smasher has been hiding out, but find nothing worthwhile except Johnny's Porsche, so honestly, I was pretty happy with how things turned out. I freaking love getting new cars in this game. Oh, and the crony who used to work for Smasher gives you the location of where Johnny's body was buried, or rather, dumped. To nobody's surprise, there is no indication that the corpse of a terrorist was discarded there 50 years ago, and the lack of any marker hits Johnny far harder than one might expect.
You really need symbolic, empty gestures?
Guess I do. Thought I'd feel like I'd closed a chapter here. Like I'd said goodbye to the old Silverhand. Hello to the new.
If you or I were to visit our graves after death, we too would want to see some sign that we are remembered. At least a headstone, maybe a nice inscription, perhaps there are even fresh flowers put there by someone who still remembers us fondly. That's not what Johnny's looking for. He doesn't want a sign that those who knew him loved him. He freely admits in this conversation that the people whom he deemed friends could barely stand to be in his presence. No, Johnny wants an assurance, a physical reminder that the asshole he used to be is dead and buried.
Listen, I realize I fucked up a lot of things. Either let down or used every last person who gave me their trust. Blind, selfish bastard that I was. But I've managed one thing for now. Not to fuck this up. What we have.
I mean, he tried. We both tried. Not that you could blame either V or Johnny for wanting out of this predicament, but it's not as if things were always sunshine and roses between the pair, which they acknowledge, don't get me wrong. The two have no delusions about the smoothness of the shared road they have traveled. And that's why I love this conversation more than just about any other in the game. V and Johnny are honest with one another. They talk as good friends should, giving each other shit one moment and opening their hearts to one another the next. The strongest of friendships are formed in the crucible of war, and these two have been through hell together. Once they finally stopped fighting each other, it was inevitable they should form a bond. It's insane that you can finish the main story without completing this mission, but that's the nature of an RPG, I guess. If you want to view Johnny purely as an unwelcome guest in your head, you can do that, and this conversation would feel wildly out of place. But for my part, seeing Johnny get closure and decide that he truly can move forward was an invaluable experience. His struggle with his past failures and his doubt that he could make anything of what little future he has left humanized Johnny, and this world desperately needs more humanity. So of course, we had to get him on that date with Rogue, though how the hell they managed to find a working drive-in movie theater in the year 2077 is beyond me. This might very well be the most unrealistic piece of science fiction in the whole game. As to how that date went...
Okay, so it's 2015. If you could do it all again, what would you change? Anything at all?
I'd get Smasher before he got me. And maybe plant more charges in that tower.
So you do the exact same thing, just better.
To be fair to Johnny, and by Johnny, I mean me, the issue of Atom Smasher is still unresolved, but yeah, that wasn't exactly what Rogue wanted to hear. Which was probably for the best. She doesn't need to start a relationship with a digital construct whose lease on life is quickly reaching its expiration date. And although it was nice that they found a sort of peace in their reunion, it would be out of character for them not to clash at least a little in their final conversation. But before we wrap up Johnny's story, there is one more loose end that needs to be tied off. No, not Smasher, he'll come later. Instead, we embark on a mission to quite literally get the band back together, reuniting Samurai for a final farewell gig. I won't bother recounting each mini-adventure you go on, collecting band members one by one, though I will say I chose Henry over Denny because dumping a truckload of concrete into a backyard pool is objectively hilarious. You don't really explore the relationship Johnny had with any of the band members beyond Carrie, of whom he is obviously jealous despite the mockeries he flings Carrie's way, but there's really no need to. What matters is that, if only for one more night, this band matters to Johnny. As with Rogue, it's important for us to see that he has passions beyond blowing up the corpos. He is not merely a force of destruction. He is a man who loves music, who loves expressing himself in song, and who may even love the friends who play alongside him. 50 years ago, Johnny may not have cared much for what they thought or wanted, but now I think, given the chance, he'd take a bullet for them, too. Who would Johnny Silverhand die for? His friends. The tragedy of that beautiful sentiment is that it was not until he had already crossed death's door that Johnny finally discovered what it truly meant to be a friend. The concepts of selfless gift and unfailing loyalty were, for so long, foreign to him. He was hardly alone in this void. Night City is designed to turn the attention of each of its citizens inward, focusing on one's own pleasures, wants, and needs. As we have seen, this causes a drastic loss of humanity. So let us turn our attention to those whose lives bear witness to the loyalty they have to something beyond their own selfish ambitions. If you're familiar with Cyberpunk 2077's story, you've likely noted the absence of one crucial character up till this point in the video.
Panam moves merch for me. Last job? Well, wasn't a good day for her.
She run into a hitch?
Complete bust, actually. Lost the goods and her ride. Panam will do anything to get the load back. Means her dignity.
I know her.
Right from the start, Panam is introduced to us as someone who values, perhaps above all else, her own competency. She is eminently self-reliant, as evidenced by her noticeable lack of implants. Not that Panam is 100% organic, as that would be akin to suicide in this world, and she does jack into her own vehicle and the basilisk tank we obtain later on, but she seems to want to appear unenhanced. Being a badass merc is cool and all, and fancy chrome can be intimidating, but how much more imposing is someone with a flawless track record, doubtless accompanied by a significant body count, who looks like she could kick your ass with last century's tech? And Panam does rely on somewhat older technology, as V points out in her car while the two are on their way to sabotage a power station to down the AV that will be carrying Anders Hellman, whom we met earlier.
Hey, I think your implant has a virus. The one in the nape of your neck.
I know, but it's nothing to worry about. Nothing dangerous or anything.
Maybe for you, but this vehicle only has basic security soft. If it's something
Don't
advanced...
worry. Nothing too advanced. Pretty backwards, actually.
Real fucking funny.
Even the way Panam speaks sets her apart, mostly in that she uses far fewer contractions than everyone else, who all act as if they're getting charged by the word. Honestly, I would be surprised if there wasn't already some voice box implant that has a word cap like Comcast has a data cap. The other thing that sets Panam apart is the fact that she is no longer a part of the Aldecaldo's clan, having left not too long ago due to strategic differences she had with their leader, Saul. I tried telling her she'd better call Saul and make nice, but for some reason that wasn't a dialogue option in this game. Hey, they made other shameless references, why not this one?
But there is secret. I killed Tiger Crow boss on purpose. World-best surgeon, make no mistake.
Here come the test results. You are a horrible person. I'm serious. That's what it says. A horrible person. We weren't even testing for that.
Oh yeah, I didn't really plan to include that Delamain questline in this video, but you know I pressed the reset button on that sucker and killed GLaDOS. Sorry, Johnny, you don't know what I know. That clanker had to go. Anyway, the main conflict in Panam's questline arises because she is pulled in two opposite directions. Her own skill and capability make her tend toward independence, while her fierce loyalty urges her to stay close to her nomad family. The aforementioned Saul is what keeps those two halves of Panam from combining into a seamless whole, as he has come to hold the safety of the clan as the one and only good in this world.
When you're an Aldecaldo, you are always responsible for yourself and your people. The circumstances change nothing. Perhaps Panam should ask herself if she's still an Aldecaldo.
I won't do a deep dive into the conflict between Panam and Saul, but here's the 1,000-foot view. Saul wants to take on contracts from corporations such as Biotechnica, who apparently need help with crop protection, because they are safe and predictable sources of revenue and stability. Panam does not want to end up under a corp's thumb, and insists they make their own way in the desert outside Night City. At a crucial juncture in this little war of theirs, Panam and a few of the veteran nomads are planning a mission to steal a basilisk tank from Militech, and V can choose whether to accompany them or snitch to Saul. Naturally, I went on the mission where you, let me repeat that, steal a tank, because that's awesome. But if you can't understand where Saul is coming from here, you're missing out on one of the game's main themes. He may be less bold than he used to be. He may even be rightly called a coward. But Saul embodies the virtue of loyalty, and his is true loyalty. He cares about the well-being of his people, not his own schemes or ideals. However, being proficient in one virtue does not mean that very goodness cannot be twisted and misused. Early on in Fellowship of the Ring, Gandalf states that the way to my heart is pity and the desire to do good, and the One Ring would misuse those good intentions in order to make him into a Dark Lord, one even worse than Sauron, according to Tolkien's letters. Point being, Saul has genuinely noble intentions, just as Panam does, and we should appreciate what is good about him even though we may think him misguided and side with Panam. I truly appreciate when stories present us with characters who are both sympathetic, even as they fight with each other. Yes, Panam is more right than Saul, but you definitely understand where he's coming from. We don't learn a lot about Saul's backstory, but Panam alludes to it during one car ride.
Moving civilians across the border during a bombardment? Hijacking a petrochem tanker? Opening the valves? Cranking a few figure eights to set the desert ablaze and give the kids a fun show? That's the Saul I remember.
Considering the fact that all those heroic hijinks landed them here, pitching their tents just outside Night City proper, it's no small wonder Saul wants to change things up. And you can choose to side with him when he objects to the whole steal a piece of military hardware from one of the world's most powerful corporations plan, but then you end the entire Panam questline and lock yourself out of arguably the happiest ending. But hey, maybe that would be in the Aldecaldo's best interest. After all, that's what both Panam and Saul care most about, what they're loyal to, the good of the family. While Saul is hardly Dutch Vanderland, he's quite the opposite, at least on the brash, cowardly spectrum. In Panam, we see a shadow of one of the core themes of Arthur's character arc in Red Dead Redemption 2. Be loyal to what matters. Loyalty cannot be blind obedience, or it ceases to be a virtue at all. Being loyal to our leaders is only commendable if we follow those worth following. If they have abandoned reason for badness, then we absolutely should forsake our loyalty to them and instead choose to be loyal to the cause they no longer hold dear. This isn't really the case for Saul and Panam. Both are about as good-hearted of people as you can find in this bleak world, their loyalties unshaken by the conflict between them. They just need to bury the hatchet. Things are less clear, however, when we consider the part of this story that delves more deeply into the theme of loyalty and belonging. 2077's DLC, Phantom Liberty, decides that things have been a little bit crazy for V, that Night City is a tad too chaotic, and so turns the temperature down a notch by, having you rescue the president of the new United States after her plane is shot down and crash lands in a zone of NC that is controlled by a militaristic despot. Cool. After you get President Myers to a safe location, you proceed to make contact with one agent Reed of the FIA, which is just the CIA with the first letter changed. Reed, also known as Stringer Bell, smuggles Myers out of Dogtown, you don't need or get to know how, and then joins you in the hunt for So-Mi, aka Songbird, the Netrunner who jumped into V's head and made Johnny shut up while she made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
I can cure you. Once and for all.
If that sounds too good to be true, well, just wait. Songbird disappeared after a cyber battle with a giant military bot's firewall, which is now called ICE because things make sense, and the NUSA does not like not knowing where its extremely talented and thus dangerous hackers have run off to. To aid in this search, you and Reed make contact with Alex, another former FIA agent who has gone to ground in Dogtown, and who was fed a cover story about Reed turning traitor and joining Arasaka at the end of the Unification War 7 years ago, when the truth was his death was demanded by the Corp as part of their peace terms with the NUSA. But he survived the assassination and managed to recover after a long stint of rehab. I guess they forgot to mention that bit to the Arasakas. And yes, his own government sold him out. President Myers had So-Mi lead him into the trap that very nearly claimed his life. Did you follow all that? You with me? Well, you'd better be, because this whole section of video is about loyalty. I'd hate for you to be off theme. You may be wondering at this juncture why the hell Solomon Reed is still working for the government after Saburo Arasaka asked for his head, and President Myers said, yeah, sure, no problem, Sab. Let me put my best netrunner on that right away. Let's ask him.
Even deep wounds stop hurting eventually. Scar over. A few years on, they're just an itch.
As messed up as that is, there's logic to it. An ice-cold, inhuman logic, but a pretty unassailable one. Solomon Reed worked for the FIA. He was a public servant, a dedicated soldier loyal to the good of the NUSA. He trusted his superiors to make the decisions that had the whole country's best interests at heart. Generals have sent soldiers into battle knowing some of them would die since time immemorial. Was his sacrifice any different? Yes, it absolutely was. There's a huge qualitative difference between backstabbing one of your own men and ordering him to go into battle against an enemy. But Reed doesn't see it that way. Myers, the FIA, and everyone else involved in his betrayal were simply doing what they thought necessary for the good of the country, just as he would, and did, and will. But if a man allows himself to be treated that way, he will naturally have no issue treating others in like manner. While Reed does have a sort of fatherly affection towards So-Mi, he treats her first and foremost as an asset, a means to an end, rather than an end in and of itself. So-Mi is no better. As she admits to V in a private conversation, she was the insider that hacked Myers' plane and downed it in Night City, all because there is a piece of tech buried there that, unbeknownst to anyone else, could hold the cure to her own technological disease, a virus contracted during her repeated illegal trips beyond the Black Wall at the president's behest. Putting aside the fact that she did not intend for the plane to get shot down, Songbird certainly knew that downing the president's plane in enemy territory would lead to numerous deaths, a price she was willing to pay to save her own skin, or what's left of it. The moment you meet Somi in person is quite jarring, as she looks hardly anything like the avatar she has been projecting into V's mind. I love this organic method of developing Somi's character. There is nothing all that notable about her appearance when she first hijacks the relic. She has minimal implants and no obvious major enhancements. And then, yeah, not only is her body now more chrome than flesh, she is, doubtless at Hansen's demand, wearing an outfit I assume no human woman would ever willingly adopt. But that is not how she sees herself, or at least it is not how she would like to see herself. Her avatar is a love letter to the humanity she has lost. Not only has she removed the major implants required to counteract the effects of her Blackwall visits, she has given herself a jacket and holster that, to me, give off a strong Han Solo vibe. They project an air of competence and self-determination. The former has never escaped her, but the latter was taken from her long ago.
Don't trust Reed? Guy wants to save your life.
He saved me once already. Word of a boss shit on Militech crossed his desk, so he knocked on a 19-year-old girl's door with an offer she couldn't refuse.
Join and serve or become a Netwatch trophy.
That girl died that day. The person in front of you is what was born from that death.
And it continues to be withheld from her, as the president uses Songbird over and over again for her own dubious and rather vague personal ambitions.
For Myers, the NUSA, I'm just another weapon in their arsenal. A tool for reaching beyond the Blackwall. And weapons and tools, they don't get to make decisions or choose to retire.
This conversation with Somi is one of my favorite moments in Phantom Liberty. Not only does it amp up the stakes by revealing the truth of her plan, it also dives into this theme of lost humanity that is felt so deeply by these characters. Somi reminisces fondly about her childhood in Brooklyn, hearing kids playing and laughing, listening to music, and smelling the smoke of a bonfire.
Were they celebrating something?
Yeah, a Thursday.
I loved that I could place myself in this scene so easily, despite never having been to Brooklyn, because what it communicates above all else is the sense of community and belonging. Somi doesn't waste time describing the look of the buildings or the sounds of the wider city, but focuses on the human elements, the music, the food, the voices. Regardless of whether we are city dwellers, suburbanites, or country folk, we can understand what it means to simply celebrate a Thursday, to revel in the fact that we are surrounded by those who call us neighbor and friend. That which we have in common unites us. That which we withhold from each other keeps us apart. There is no shortage of secrets in Phantom Liberty's story. Surprise, surprise, government spies and hackers aren't the sharing type. Bonded though they might be by their work and their history together, there will always be a cloud of doubt. They will always wonder whether they can truly trust one another. Song betrayed Reed, Reed deceived Alex, who wears a high-tech mask as a daily habit, and so on and so forth. Layers upon layers of lies, half-truths, and secrets. Any love these people have for one another cannot possibly be pure and unconditional. After Somi reveals the truth of her intentions, that is, she plans to ditch Reed, Myers, and the NUSA to pursue treatment derived from the neural matrix buried in Dogtown Stadium, you might be tempted to think all is out in the open. Now we can find a place of compromise, maybe even a place of healing. Well,
Reed's not the only one I've betrayed.
What do you mean, Saul?
Neural matrix V can only be used once.
How long have you known this? That only one of us could come out alive.
Sign sure. I learned it existed. Started delving and...
You're fucking serious?
Just so we're keeping score, Somi hacked the president's plane, forcing it to go down in Dogtown, roped V into the mess with a promise she knew she could not fulfill, lied about her intentions to the same man she betrayed 7 years ago, and continued to string V along, leaving a trail of bodies behind, before finally admitting the full truth mere moments before boarding the flight that would take her to the moon and her cure. And in case you were wondering, yes, my V did side with Somi, both at the extraction of the Matrix, and then again when Reed showed up at the spaceport and demanded she be handed over. Not because those were the morally good choices. They weren't, but then the only moral thing to do in this situation would be to tell them both to just go home, or maybe to jail. Why make those choices then? Well, this is an RPG, so I decided that my V would be afflicted by a little thing called toxic empathy. After all, he has been running around Night City in pursuit of any and all potential cures for his own digital affliction, leaving more than a few bodies in his wake. It's not exactly a stretch to say that V sees more than a bit of himself in So-Mi, and so aids her in her plight even if he knows she is in the wrong. The two understand each other in a way few other people ever could. They share a bond that could not be forged any other way. Whether right or wrong, healthy or toxic, humans desperately want to connect with each other, to know that we are not alone, which is why I chose this dialogue option after So-Mi revealed her ultimate secret.
Could have told me the truth. Would have helped you anyway.
In many ways, we are defined by that to which we are loyal. Solomon Reed was loyal to the end, to a cause greater than himself. There is good in that, as men ought to extend their energy and talents beyond their own personal ambitions. But his unflinching, dogged dedication to a government that is clearly less than virtuous led him down an undesirable road and, in my game anyway, to his death. That is his tragedy. He was never his own man. He was just as much a tool and a weapon as So-Mi was. Songbird, for her part, felt trapped. Her loyalty demanded from the very beginning. We don't know a lot about how her sense of belonging grew and changed during her years of service with the NUSA, but considering how it all began, it's no wonder she abandoned a life of service, dubious though her actions may have been, and chases after a chance, however faint, of a normal life, a life where she can celebrate a Thursday with the people to whom she belongs. It's quite clear, however, that she never will. That is her tragedy. Even if Alex receives her spy's retirement sipping champagne in the French Riviera in the company of the rich and powerful, she will never see her dream accomplished, will never become an actress whose work is recognized and admired by thousands. Her earthly toils, whatever little they were worth, will remain buried in Dogtown. That is her tragedy. There are many more such sorrowful stories that can be found in this wretched section of Night City, few of which have anything to do with the theme of loyalty, but are worth mentioning nonetheless. There is the doctor who runs a free clinic, but is remarkably cold-hearted when taken captive by some scavs, who V naturally disposes of in order to free him.
Finally! You couldn't have done that from the start?
There is the young, enthusiastic, and naively optimistic Paco, a relatively new member of Kurt Hansen's private army, who made the poor decision to skim a little off the top, thinking it wouldn't be noticed. It was, and I will forever regret not immediately offering him a ride out of Dodge. I instead opted to try and frame one of Hansen's lieutenants, and things did not end well for poor Paco. Then we have the sports academy that operates out of Dogtown for tax purposes, and that V finds to be enhancing its students, performing invasive surgery on kids for the sake of profit. Naturally, V takes this in stride, and when he encounters the head of the academy, acts with the utmost candor and grace.
Finally.
All of these are stories of lost humanity, of people forgetting the value of those around them, of the energy and passion of youth being misused, of seeing people as fruit to be squeezed for juice. Put together, it paints a rather hopeless picture. You might wonder, is there anything worth being loyal to in the world of Cyberpunk 2077? Ultimately, if loyalty is to be a true virtue, it must be directed toward the good of others. That certainly should be achievable even in Night City, if only on a small scale, but doubt seeps in when we consider one particular questline in this game, and the question it raises. Okay, so this is actually two questlines, but they share a common starting point. V is asked by a woman named Elizabeth Perales to investigate the death of the late mayor of Night City, whose seat her husband Jefferson is running to fill. Should the player accept, we make Detective River Ward an earnest and dedicated public servant who helps V discover that the mayor's death took place in far more suspicious circumstances than the official report states. Despite Jefferson's opponent in the mayoral race being named as the chief suspect, V and River do not pursue the investigation any further, largely because River's partner was found to be involved in the cover-up. Before we even reach our branching questlines, we are already struck with a kind of answer to that question. Who we can choose to be is, in a sense, limited by the world around us, by the choices of others. River Ward would have chosen to be a straight-laced, honest, uncompromisable lawman, but to continue to act in that manner, forcing the investigation forward after the NCPD had officially closed it, would not only mean risking termination, but also destroying his long-standing friendship with Detective Hahn. So if the outcome of that particular mission left you deeply unsatisfied, it was supposed to. You were supposed to feel like you were constrained and choked by the corruption that is rampant throughout every facet of Night City's government and leadership. Thankfully, not all investigations end in such a manner. Shortly after concluding the previous case, River contacts V for assistance in another. His nephew Randy has gone missing, and he suspects the kidnapper is a man who was recently taken into custody but who was in a coma and thus unable to be questioned. The NCPD, having gotten their man, are less concerned with the multiple missing teenagers than is River, who it turns out was suspended for his recent actions regarding the death of Mayor Rhines. So V helps River buck the system, break into a hospital/lab, and go on a trip down memory lane, only they're not River's memories, but the memories of the kidnapper, Anthony Harris. These flashbacks tell us that Harris's mother died, that his father blamed him for her death and mistreated him as a result, and that his dad eventually popped a cap in his own noggin, and that his own teacher is less than sympathetic when it comes to his plight. None of this means that he was destined to become a serial kidnapper, but it does beg the question, could Anthony Harris have lived a good life? Was that even possible when the circumstances of his upbringing worked against his healthy development at every turn? Again, no one forced him to seek out vulnerable, lonely teenagers. No one made him set up a website with a hidden section specifically designed to lure them into his trap. No one but him drugged them and shoved them into those bovine feeding hoods. You might be wondering what on earth Harris was doing with these kids. Me too. My best guess is that he thought he was saving them, and that he was trying to make up for his mistakes. As we see in a flashback, he is berated by his father for failing to properly monitor and adjust the chemical levels in the cow, which is assumedly accomplished through these feeding hoods, and that the cattle, later the boys, wear. Randy, along with the other boys, was lonely and lost. This not only made them easy targets for manipulation, it also gave Harris the justification he needed to fix them. By doing so, he could prove to his dad, his teacher, and anyone else who might doubt him that he could take care of those cattle, damn it. The fact that at least one boy dies is, well, he probably just needs to try again. So to attempt to answer the questions I asked a minute ago, it's nigh on impossible for any human to properly judge the culpability of someone who acts in such a vile way when that person was never treated any better, when use and abuse were all they ever knew. The actions can and must be condemned as monstrous, and certainly justice should be sought, but truly knowing the heart of another is beyond our ability. It is entirely possible, of course, that Harris was offered help, was shown kindness, and rejected it, choosing instead to become what he is now. We don't know for sure, but if there's a takeaway from this horrifically dark and disturbing quest, it's that trauma is passed from generation to generation, but it may only take one act of kindness to break the vicious cycle. At the end of it all, River Ward reconnects with his sister and nephew, even calling you later to invite V to dinner with them, and that can't be seen as anything other than a victory. Yet again, 2077 shows us how when we retreat into ourselves, we risk losing our humanity, and it can only be restored and strengthened when we form trusting and loving relationships with those around us. But what if that wasn't enough? What if, no matter how strong your relationship, you lost your humanity anyway? A fundamental aspect of being human is our ability to choose, our free will. In this, we differ from the rest of the animal kingdom, as we are the only species capable of not acting on instinct. At least once we reach a certain age. I don't know where my 3-year-old got his instinct that compels him to make a giant mess whenever possible, but it is clearly impossible for him to fight it. Anyway, Cyberpunk veterans will know that I am referring to the Peralez questline, the other branch that gets created after you and River investigate Ryan's death. Jefferson Peralez, you may recall, is running for mayor and is attempting to do so in squeaky clean fashion.
So far, we've managed to effectively turn down offers to work with Night Corp, Biotechnica, Arasaka.
So far, you say?
If Jeff can get elected without owing anybody, favors or otherwise, that'd be the real victory.
The couple has called V to the scene because of a break-in at their apartment, but one which their on-site security claims never happened, despite Jefferson having a vivid memory of shooting at the intruder before inexplicably collapsing unconscious on the floor and then waking up back in his own bed. V's investigation quickly turns up proof that there were shots fired and that someone was hit, someone who proceeded to patch himself up inside the apartment, Go figure, it was an inside job. SSI, it turns out, wasn't so much working for the Prowlesses as it was working them. V discovers an old transmitter on the roof that leads him to a nearby surveillance van whose purpose turns out to be far more nefarious than he could have ever guessed.
Pictures, medical records, vulnerability to neuroplasticity. Some kind of database. Brain scans, the paralysis, biological casts, neuroplasticity.
Fuck. What about that? The blue shit.
Fresh neural links. They're not spying on them, Johnny. They're fucking with their heads.
Mean to say someone's literally controlling our upstanding politicians' minds?
The subsequent conversation you have with Elizabeth confirms this. Jefferson's personality has changed. He doesn't remember his favorite movie or song. He forgot his brother ever existed. Or maybe Elizabeth was wrong about all those things. Now, it would make more sense for Jefferson to be the main target of the brain altering, seeing as he's the mayoral candidate and all, but I would be shocked if the perps, whose true motivation and employers remain hidden, weren't messing with her head, too. She acknowledges this, reasonably enough, but what threw me for a loop was her reason for calling this meeting. Elizabeth knew SSI were up to no good, even if she was unaware of the full extent of their deceit and had not put two and two together until V's investigation. However, she did not ask V to meet because she wanted his help taking down whoever instigated the spying and mind altering, but rather to tell him to keep all of this to himself, that she would fire SSI and tell Jefferson they were spying for his opponent, and nothing more. This decision was inspired by a threatening phone call she received and by the one instinct she is certain has not and cannot be altered by this mysterious tech.
All I know is I love my husband, and I want him to be safe and happy.
There's a note of hope in that sentence that is otherwise entirely absent from this conversation. Elizabeth is understandably distraught and exhausted, hence the sunglasses indoors, but she is still confident that her love for Jefferson is untouchable. Whatever else about her memories, her tastes, or her personality may have been altered, she knows that is real. She has a foundation on which she can still build, or rebuild. Not wanting to lose that last bastion of certainty, she asks V to go along with the lie, to keep her husband from wanting to take on this mysterious entity behind the brainwashing. What does V do? Well, naturally that's up to you, but regardless of your intentions when going to meet Jefferson, you receive a phone call.
It doesn't matter what you tell him. It doesn't matter what you think of doing or do. You can't change anything.
If I wasn't already dead set on telling Jefferson the truth before that moment, I certainly was after. I might consider listening to a wife's frantic pleas to protect her husband, but when the bad guy makes it personal, nah, he's gotta go down. So, my V told Jefferson the truth of the matter, which understandably rattled him a little. But his shock quickly turned into steadfast resolve.
First, I'll find him. Then I'll find whoever's behind this. Pull the curtain back on these motherfuckers and show them what's what. They've made me a winner. And they're gonna regret that. For now, I'll let them think they're pulling the strings.
And that's pretty much that. Jefferson leaves, and Johnny mentions something about rogue AIs prowling cyberspace being a possible culprit before voicing his respect for Mr. Peralez.
What matters is that guy decided to take up the gauntlet. My man.
As with Elizabeth earlier, there remains one element of Jefferson's personality that the rogue AI or whoever or whatever is behind his mind control cannot touch. He's a fighter. It felt wrong to take that away from him, to feed him a lie and pretend it was simply a bit of political espionage, to hide his true enemy from him, to deny him a chance to fight. If any quest in Cyberpunk made you ask a flurry of existential questions, it would be this one. What would it be like to suddenly find out that your brain has been nudged and coaxed by an outside force slowly pushing you down a road without you having any idea you were being guided? Could you trust your judgment ever again? Or would you be forever afraid that it was not purely your own? This is one of those sci-fi technologies that is clearly a bit far-fetched, but maybe only a bit. The brain's biology, after all, is a bunch of electrochemical impulses, I think. It's been a while since I took that neuropsychology class. It's not that hard to imagine a device that could alter your impulses in certain ways. Sure, the human brain is immensely more complex than our most powerful computers, but it's only a matter of time, right? Gosh, I hope not. Regardless of how freaky this idea is, I cannot express enough how much I appreciated that both Elizabeth and Jefferson were shown to have a central aspect to their personalities that could not be changed. The core of who they were was ultimately untouchable. So, I would argue that the answer to the question, can we truly choose who we are, is not a resounding and unqualified yes. There are far too many factors, be they familial traumas or the interference of rogue AIs, that have deep and lasting impacts on our psyches. But the answer Cyberpunk gives is also not no. This is, after all, a game about choice and consequence. Our futures are not determined for us, regardless of whatever outside forces might be present. Yeah, our options might be constrained by factors outside our control, as well as our past choices, but we still have them. We can still choose. We may not be able to break a certain barrier or pass a certain boundary, but perhaps we can shift them, bit by bit, in our desired direction. We can and must rely on what we know above all else to be true about ourselves. That brings us to the final, foundational, and ultimate question Cyberpunk 2077 asks its players. Now, this is a difficult question to answer for a video essay about an RPG, as your V and my V might be entirely different people. Different gender, different background, different choices during missions, different dialogue options, and of course, different endings. So, with no real other option, let me tell you about my V's journey and what his experiences have to say about rediscovering lost humanity. Nomad V begins his story in one of the worst scrapes a man can find himself. He is alone. Having left the Backer clan, V wanders toward Night City, enduring a mouthy mechanic and a local sheriff with entirely too much self-confidence, before managing to radio a friend in his former clan for info on the job that is taking him to NC. That conversation ends with a note of finality.
Just don't get yourself killed. And don't call again.
However, as I mentioned earlier, almost the very next thing that happens is Jackie Wells enters your life. It's not a smooth ride, exactly what with the Corpo car chase and Jackie admitting he intended to rip you off, but still, you manage to form a bond. He takes you in, introduces you to Mama Wells, gets you into the Merc business, and probably chips in when you get your own apartment. I don't have proof of that. It's just my headcanon. Seems like something Jackie would do. It's a shame the big fella doesn't accompany V throughout most of the game's story, seeing as his death is the reason any of the relic business happens, but from a narrative perspective, it makes sense. If V had been the one to initially slot the biochip and then still gotten shot by Dex, do you think Jackie would have left his best friend's side for an instant until this problem got solved? I seriously doubt it. And this journey of V's is one that needs to be taken alone. Not completely, of course. You have many companions and conspirators during your time as V, all of whom have some effect on your decisions and the way you see the world, and of course, there's Johnny. But if Jackie had stuck around, I get the sense a massive percentage of players would have chosen whatever ending lets V continue to hang out with him, and that would be decidedly less interesting. Also, if Jackie were alive, I bet he would have found a way to fix all of these problems in a satisfying way. But, as it is, V has to answer that all-important question without his best friend. The best way to do so would be to answer the 4 previous questions, but it's kind of hard to focus on knowing what you would live or die for when all your energy is spent on finding a way to simply survive. And yet, an imminent death might cause one to ask those questions of oneself for the first time. One of the game's most psychologically poignant scenes takes place in one of its most despicable locations, where V talks with the woman whose implant has enabled her to speak to his deepest desires.
You're scared because you've given up on your dreams. What happened to becoming the best in all of Night City?
Wasn't so long ago I really wanted that. But then all this shit happened. Seems like I was living in a dreamland. I just want the world to know that I was here. That I mattered.
I'm not sure there is a line that could more perfectly encapsulate this game's philosophy than V's last one in that clip. This is a world that encourages its citizens to live as if no one else matters. Other people are just there to make your food, provide you with sensual pleasures, and be the star, sometimes the unwilling star, in the latest and freakiest brain dance. You don't need anyone else to be happy. Night City has all the bread and circuses you could possibly ask for. Here, have a mega burrito from a vending machine and go back to living in the heads of people in their final moments. Even so, this desire of V's is a universal one. We want to belong, to know that we are loved, that our memory will not fade at the moment of our death. This is how we know that we are truly human. To be human is to love and be loved, to share in the joys and sorrows of those around you, to know that you matter to them and they to you. It's why the Ofrenda exists, to ensure a family's story will continue to be told that generation after generation will remember all those who came before, that they will be assured that those who come after will remember them. Failing to attend Jackie's funeral and place an object on his ofrenda should lock you out of all the good endings, if you ask me. Not that any of the endings could really be called good in an objective sense. I wasn't remotely surprised by this, of course. Nothing about this world and this story suggested V would get a happier retirement where he could live out his many days in peace and tranquility. And while I've only actually gotten one of the possible endings, from what I've read, it doesn't really get any better. This was also the ending that, it turned out, matched the planned theme of this video supremely well. As I said a few minutes ago, Nomad V starts out as a loner, someone who is fed up with the leadership of his clan and has decided it would be better to seek his own fortune. He then finds a kindred soul in Panam, but one who has not taken that step of severing ties with her family. Not yet, anyway. As you play through her questline, I like to think that V realizes he might have made a mistake. Yes, family can be difficult. Yes, having to obey orders you would rather not obey flies in the face of everything this world tells you. Yes, sometimes you will want to strangle those closest to you, but it's worth it. Because every man and woman in this clan would walk through hell for every other, because they belong to each other, because they matter to one another. No exceptions. The scene where V is given his Aldecaldo's jacket is one of the best in the game, especially if you play the Nomad life path, because this is not just V going back to a familiar life. It is him re-embracing a life he abandoned. He isn't thinking, well, Night City sucks, so let's give this a try. The life of a nomad is a known entity to him. V is all too familiar with the various pains and annoyances that necessarily result from belonging to a family, and he decides that it is worth it. He chooses to be a part of something, even if that means subordinating himself to a greater whole, giving up his full agency and vowing to obey the leader of the clan and put the good of the family ahead of his own. Night City promises freedom from all that. It assures its residents that they can choose whoever they want to be, whatever they want to be. All you have to do is visit a Ripperdoc. Or, this place. Night City lies. The man who looks constantly inward, whether his focus is on his own image or carnal pleasure, will never find happiness or freedom, but will forever be a miserable slave to his own desires. His humanity will be lost. No such fate will ever find the man who makes a vow to give himself over to the good of his people. It is only once we have abandoned the ridiculous notion that we must be entirely self-made that we can be truly free. Becoming a nomad again did not hamper V's agency as he once thought it did, but instead gave it meaning and purpose. As Saul says at the induction ceremony, though that is far too formal a term, V has been a de facto member of the family for some time. Saving their butts no fewer than 3 times will do that. Now it's their turn. To set the stage, you begin the final mission of the game by meeting Hanako Arasaka at Ember's restaurant, where she proposes V tell the Arasaka board how he witnessed Yorinobu murder Saburo. This would allow Hanako to rise to the top spot within the company, and in return, V would receive treatment for his silver-handed affliction. Johnny, being Johnny, absolutely despises the idea of working with Arasaka, and I can't say I was so hot for it myself. He proposes you call Rogue, give him control, and they storm Arasaka Tower just like the good old days, with the hopes of finding Mikoshi, getting Alt inside, destroying the digital prison, and separating V and Johnny's intertwined psyches. Or you can choose to ask Panam for help. I went with door 3. The plan is similar enough to Johnny's. Infiltrate Arasaka Tower by hijacking a massive drill currently being used for a nearby construction project, find Mikoshi, etc. It is an extremely dangerous strategy that will almost certainly result in more than one member of the Aldecaldos getting killed, but they're all in. If this strikes you as unsettling, rest assured V feels the same way.
Accept me in your family, and how do I repay you? By taking you on an excursion through hell. It isn't fair of me, Panam. It wasn't fair from the start.
You know what's not fair? That you want me to massage your bruised conscience. Well, I won't do it. We're all in this together.
You're right.
I love Panam's answer. It's not fair. Life isn't fair. Love isn't fair. Relationships are not meant to be balanced, not a matter of push and pull, giving and receiving in carefully weighted measures. That's not love, that's commerce. Love is all in. You give all you have for those whom you love. Yes, you know that they would do the same for you, but that's not why you do it. You go all in because you love, and by doing so, you show your love. No, it's not fair. It's beautiful. It's human. And yes, at least 2 Alcaldos, including Saul, die during the attack on Arasaka Tower, but love does not count the cost. Love simply gives. And so we find ourselves at the end of our story. Fortress Arasaka has been breached, Atom Smasher has been dealt with, Mikoshi infiltrated by the rogue AI formerly known as Alt Cunningham, and V and Johnny are finally separated, but at a great cost.
Once you jacked into Mikoshi, she lit you up with Soul Killer.
Your output don't fuck around.
I am not his girlfriend.
We've already talked about the confusing metaphysics regarding Soul Killer, so I won't belabor the point. What matters now is we have come to a crossroads. V can choose to take his body back, but live only 6 months due to the DNA rewrites performed by the relic, or he can give his body to Johnny's construct, who will live, well, as long as someone who acts like Johnny Silverhand is likely to live. What's most striking about this scene, however, is what Johnny says shortly after breaking the bad news to V.
Because we're sticking to the plan. I'm going with Alt fuck knows where. You're keeping your body.
The change in Johnny's character that had to take place to lead us to this moment is nothing short of astounding. He went from wanting to kill V to being willing to use V's body and bide his time to becoming friends to the point that he vowed he would give his life for V's. And he makes good on his word.
So take back your life. The 6 months you got left.
I think back to that scene in the dump outside Night City where Johnny finally comes to terms with his own death. That was a side quest. I didn't have to do that, but I cannot imagine this ending without having had that conversation with Johnny, without hearing him tell V,
of all the heads I could have popped up in, hella glad it was yours.
Johnny Silverhand was a maniac, a murderer, and an overall terrible person, but now he's a good friend. And yeah, you could say that it's no real sacrifice, that he's just code, but is he?
We've learned how to turn into pure data, but an animal still prowls inside us, and its instinct to survive almost can't be extinguished.
I love this notion that despite having the technology to copy a human psyche into cyberspace, there is still something ineffable about the self, something that cannot be quantified, measured, or restrained by ones and zeros. No computer can ever truly capture the beauty and magnificence that is the human person. Cyberpunk 2077 doesn't explain how, because it can't. No one can. We are mysteries that we will never unravel. We are more wonderful than any algorithm could compute, too incredible to be fully encoded on a piece of machinery. That truth is what this scene hints at. Despite the efforts of the corpse, the governments, and all earthly powers to commodify mankind, humanity can never be a thing. And so, bittersweet though this finale is, I find it hard to imagine a better way to end the game than by escaping Night City, leaving its suffocating pleasures far behind, embracing open air, clear skies, and loyal friends. That was my choice. Your answer to the question, who are you, may have been entirely different, but it is a choice we all get to make, that we all must make, by choosing what causes and people we devote our lives to, by vowing to die rather than surrender our chosen hill, by remaining true to that which we have proclaimed our own, and by finding that part of our own heart that is indelible and uncorruptible. We will know who we are. We will know that we are human. And that, my friends, is a beautiful thing.
Well?
It's perfect. All great, Panam. We're going home.